Welcome to the Landlord Advocate.
Hey everyone, welcome into an all-new episode of the Landlord Advocate. I am your host, Mike Leon. I'm joined here by Matthew Paletz, the CEO of Paletz Law, along with Paletz Law Chief Operating Officer and Attorney John Mione. Listen, gents, it's good to see you guys, but today's episode, we're going to be talking about protecting your rental property from disruption. Whether you manage manufactured housing or large multifamily apartment portfolios, dealing with problem tenants, safety issues, harassment, drug activity, it's one of the toughest legal and business challenges you'll face. And John and Matt are going to break all this down in just a second. But before we start the episode, guys, it is good to see you. John, let me ask you a little bit. You have not been on this series yet, so let's talk a little bit about your role over at Paletz Law. When you think about law firms, you don't typically think about operations, yet you're the COO. So what does that entail?
Well, thanks, Mike, and I'm glad to be here. You're right. Most law firms don't look at it as a business first, but unless you're working for the government or a nonprofit, you have to look at that way to be successful. So with us, it all starts with how Matt has organized the firm to have a corporate hierarchy. Him as the CEO that really outlines the vision of and the direction that the firm wants to go. And then me as the Chief Operating Officer, the best way I can describe it is making sure that I am doing what needs to be done internally to meet those goals, whether short or long term, that Matt has outlined, and to make sure our workflows and procedures are operating at maximum efficiency, and that our personnel, both human personnel and our technological personnel, which we'll talk about later, are aligned to best serve our clients.
Well, that's great to hear. And I did mention at the onset about what this episode is going to be around and in these tenant issues. So, Matt, let me turn to you because we've been talking about throughout this series tenant issues and how they're problematic for landlords. What kinds of tenant behaviors are considered, and I'm using air quotes for the audience out there, disruptive or maybe even grounds for some type of legal action?
Yeah, and again, it's great to be back on the program, Mike, and it's great to have John here. And what John alluded to is that our systems are in place to do what we can to better enhance the client experience, right? And disruptive tenants certainly don't enhance the client experience as a landlord. One of the major issues is as far as what tenants do is, aside from non-payment, obviously, are more like unruly behavior. Maybe they're not supervising their kids. The technical term is called interfering with the client enjoyment of other tenants. And so we have to deal with those issues. And if that is going to be cause enough to subject them to having to remove them from the tenancy, then we have to make sure that the ducks are in a row to do that. So you could have like drug offenses. You could have police activity on the premises. You could have criminal activity. All of these other things have to be make sure that we're taking a keen eye on and guiding our clients appropriately and accordingly so that we can make sure that we can get the rental unit back and as in good a condition as it possibly can be in.
John, let me piggyback on that. What mistakes have you guys seen or you personally have seen that landlords make when they're trying to remove a problematic tenant from the property?
Well, the biggest mistake that we see actually comes before they attempt that removal, and it's by not documenting the history of the tenancy and certain violations or conduct issues. In the legal world, we have a saying that if it's not in writing, then it didn't happen. And the reason we say that is because if you have a contested issue that you have to go to court on, in a landlord-tenant case, the judge looks at it by a preponderance of the evidence standard. So typically, whomever has the more supporting evidence will be looked at more favorably. So it's very important for landlords to always document the history of issues, whether that's by sending rule violation notices, formal correspondence, or taking pictures if it's something to be documented. So that's the biggest mistake that we typically see. We also see, and this is human nature, sometimes a property manager or a staff person might tend to make it a little bit more personal than it should be. They have a very difficult job because they're the face of that landlord or the corporation, whether big or small. So if an issue comes up with a resident or tenant, they're the ones that have to bear the brunt of it. But they have to do their best to not make it personal, follow, the guidelines of the community. And what we always tell our clients, hey, if there's an issue like that, get us involved and we can help be that middle man or woman on your behalf. And then another smaller thing, when they're at the point where they're looking to possibly litigate, is there's sometimes you use the wrong notice. That's why it's best to get a law firm like us at Paletz Law involved, so we can help get that notice prepared to make sure it meets all the criteria under the law. Because oftentimes a court will kick a case based on a small technicality if a minor provision is of that notice was not followed, and then you've lost that entire notice period. So we always tell our clients, give us a call and we'll help you get that notice so we don't have any potential delays later on.
I heard an allusion to documents there. So Matt, what other types of documentation is needed to remove the tenant there?
Yeah, and I'm glad that John mentioned, our systems in place and to be preemptive. We preach that all the time, right? You got to be preemptive, especially with our clients, to make sure that they have these documents in place, or they're having a consultation with us to make sure that's being done. Because time is literally money in the rental management business, right, Mike? It just is. Right. If more time is going by and you have to start over a case, that could be months. And that's additional months of revenue that, quite frankly, the property isn't realizing. And that over time, in the aggregate, that can impact the financial health of the property. But to answer your question, let's say police were involved, right? So are we getting the requisite police reports? Pictures are always helpful. Was there video? These are all things that, again, no stone should be unturned to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to put the client in the best position in order to be as successful as they can in the case. So, it's not rocket science, but it also, you got to, have a good pay attention to detail. And that's what we do.
John, let me ask you, is there a risk associated if you do nothing and you hope the problem goes away on its own, the tenant leaves on their own? I know that's not going to happen, but I got to ask the question.
Oh, well, sadly, sometimes it does. But yeah, there's massive risk involved. First of all, it kind of, as a manager or landlord, it weakens your position if you're continuing to let violations go on undeterred. And what happens from that point is, all your other residents or tenants that are behaving, they're paying their rent, they're following what needs to be done, it's going to disrupt their own quiet enjoyment. And that itself could lend to a cause of action against you, the landlord. So for example, if you got assigned parking spaces in your parking lot and residents are supposed to be parking in certain ones and they're continuing to park in others and management is not doing anything, then the ones who are following the rules, they can't park where they need to. And then they start to look at the situation and say, well, what's going on with this landlord? Why is he not following through? Perhaps from a corporate standpoint, the bigger risk is if you're not consistently, as a property manager or landlord, following through on what you need to do, it's going to lead to potential lost revenue, because maybe you're going to miss a tenant for a couple months who hasn't been paying his rent. And now when you go to court, he's 3, 4, 5 months behind instead of just a couple weeks behind. And in our experience, the longer you wait as a landlord to start that legal process, especially for non-payment, the likelihood of you recovering that amount decreases significantly. So by doing nothing in that event, you're going to cost the property money by not acting quickly enough.
And that's not to say, by the way, that you can't still work out, deals or settlements with the tenant, but you don't want to give up that leverage. And it is a negotiation. You should be acting early and often. And when there's behavioral issues, the longer that you wait on this, it also impacts your credibility with the judge, right, John?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, so it really is something that you just as property management, you just have to be mindful of, and you've got to be on it. And if you're not, you got to make sure your lawyer's on it. That's key.
Well, speaking of your lawyer on it, for each of you, and Matt, we'll start with you first. Can you share a story about a time when the law firm helped a landlord resolve a serious tenant disruption without obviously getting into intricate details?
Yeah, and this happened just yesterday, actually, and it was a major problem. And we came in and we made sure to ensure that it didn't become an even bigger problem. And I want to make it very clear that, yes, this is our profession, okay, but we don't take any pleasure of displacing anyone from where they are, okay? There's a long process that goes to give a tenant multiple chances. And our clients are, absent, behavioral and disruption issues. A landlord does not want to evict a tenant. I think that's a common misconception. It costs money. It's timely. There's a lot of other things that they are now distracted from having to do by managing the property. They don't want to have to do that. They just want to try and rehabilitate the relationship so the tenant's going to pay. But if you have disruptive tenants, then yeah, it's really important that you have someone in, who knows what they're doing to help you do that. Perfect example yesterday, we had, and I'll try not to get too in the weeds on this, so I don't want to put you to sleep. What happened was we had already gone to court on a tenant, okay? They had actually agreed to move out. They actually did move out. However, they allowed someone to come in their unit. And when it came time to just to make sure the unit was secured, we found out that there was someone in there. No landlord-tenant relationship, no lease, didn't even know who this person was. The term squatter is used ubiquitously all the time, and it's usually wrong. This was a classic squatter. Had no business being there, had no reason to be there, okay? So then we were like, hey, listen, I don't know who you are, but you need to vacate. They refused to do that. Then they started sending me, I swear, a blizzard of AI-generated nonsensical documents talking about Constitution and all this other thing that had nothing to do with this, right? So again, we're very calm, very clear about it. Hey, you don't have a right to be here. But one of the things that separates us from our competitors is that we then were proactive with the court officer to say, the court officer, look, there's an impending move out that's going to happen. You need to be prepared that she's going to just throw this blizzard of stuff at you. You need to know what you're talking about. And that sometimes if you see on YouTube, where you see these things where the tenant is like throwing all this stuff and the court officer kind of gets confused, and then it doesn't happen. So we were very, again, proactive about that. So what did we do? Got him prepped. He was ready to go. Then he was on. I said, if she tries to give you any more documents, immediately call me. You got my cell, right? Calls me on my cell. She's sending him these other documents. She said she's appealed the action. Well, the appeal turned out to be not even related to this case, and it was even denied anyway. So I was able to quickly go on our computer to look at the case, then send it back to the court officer saying, nope, this is not relevant. You may proceed. And he had, the resolve to do so. And so, that's an example of, look, again, it's unfortunate that this lady, had to leave, but on the same token, she had no right to be there. And so we interceded to make sure that our client was able to get their unit back, because we don't know who this person is. And the residents who are there, who have contracted legally to be there, have a right to at least understand that the other people that are their neighbors are there legitimately. And I think, again, that gets a lot of time, and I get fired up about this, because it's like too easy to say, oh, well, you took care of this in this manner. Well, no, we were protecting the environment and we were protecting the building. And that was our duty to do as lawyers on behalf of our clients. And I make no apologies about that. What about the worst?
Well, I can see, I hear the passion, but wait a minute. But I want to say, as we kind of wind down here on this episode, because you stole my thunder a little bit, Matt, there, because I was just about to ask John.
Do I have a tendency to do that?
It happens from time to time, but
I can tell it happens. Well, but I wanted to ask, because he mentioned about the differentiation from competitors. So what other systems are in place, given that example that we just talked about? What other systems are in place that you guys have in place to differentiate Paletz Law from everybody else?
I was going to say that's right in John's wheelhouse, because he's been helping I will say, just to give him his flowers, been a huge architect of our systems to not only help us internally, but also enhance the client experience. I'll just say, and John's been amazing at that.
Well, Mike. Well, thanks, Matt. And Mike, I could probably take 30 minutes and telling you how we differentiate ourselves in a positive manner from our competitors. But I'll be brief. And the first thing is actually just our people, the personnel that we have with us, our attorneys, our staff members. They are all integral to what we do as a company. We have a very collaborative approach. We have 12 attorneys, a full support staff, and landlord tenant is what we do. So everyone is pushing the boat in the same direction. And that's first and foremost what differentiates us, is that really strong core of people. And with our attorneys, it's not just that we have 12 attorneys, but they are very experienced in landlord tenant law. They know the judges, they know the procedures, they understand our clients and their needs. Now, what we do is, as Matt was alluding to, we supplement that human power with technological innovations. We have a Paletz portal that provides all of our clients a 24/7 snapshot of what is going on with every single case in their portfolio. They can pull it up on their computer, on their mobile phone. They can see the case, see when we filed it, see when the next hearing is. They can message us. We can respond to them within that. If they need to dismiss a case, they can do that. If they need to file suit on a case, they can do that. We've really designed this as a tool for the 21st century that we live in, because everybody wants access to a portal to put control in their own hands, and that's what we've done. And then the third thing that really differentiates us is beyond landlord-tenant, there are a lot of other areas where we can fully dedicate ourselves to. Fair housing defense, which we do nationally. We can help. We have a large portfolio of manufactured housing clients. We're actually the largest representative of manufactured housing in Michigan. And with that comes some unique challenges. And because of that, we have a department dedicated to pursuing abandoned titles. If a home is left at the property and the homeowner is gone, we have procedures in place to pursue a title to that home for our clients. Also, sometimes if someone's buying a home and they become delinquent on it, the creditor has to get that property back. So we can do that as well. And that's something called claim and delivery. And also bankruptcy. Landlords have tons and tons of residents and tenants, and sometimes they file bankruptcy. And we have a whole staff of attorneys that are dedicated to that, and they can act very quickly as soon as that bankruptcy notice comes in. And with bankruptcy courts, time is of the essence. If you don't get there and get your proof of claim filed or take action quickly, that could result in significantly lost revenue to the operator, which, as we've covered, could have a very damaging effect. So those are just a few of the ways that we differentiate ourselves. But I think the biggest thing is, our people and Matt's leadership, how he has been able to, cultivate our personnel to all have that collaborative view. We always like to say internally, we're collaborative with each other, but we're not competitive with each other where we're trying to cut another person down. We all cheer for each other's successes, and that's all based on how Matt has set the lead for our firm.
Mike, I just think it's, what it is that we just take a lot of pride in offering and being professional and offering as good of second to none client experience as we can. It's all about the client.
Yep.
And it is all about our people, as John said, and we're just very appreciative for the work. And, we're up for the challenge. It's not going away, that's for sure. And, we're ready for it every day.
Gents, thank you so much for the time, the insights, explaining all this to the audience, but also about the background with the firm. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you again to everyone out there for listening to this installment of the Landlord Advocate. If you want to connect with Matt, with John, with the entire team over at Paletz Law, do me a favor right now. Visit info@paletzlaw.com. You can visit them on web, at paletzlaw.com. You can email them at info@paletzlaw.com. Do me one more favor before you go. Hit like, hit subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs an attorney. As always, I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.